work originally?
Well, I got involved in this field actually in the 1970s, and I was an undergraduate at that time. And I was a senior, and I was thinking that I was going to become a clinical psychologist. That was my plan. And I took a course on psychological testing that was taught by this famous professor at Hopkins named Julian Stanley. And in that course on psychological testing, he started talking a lot about mathematically talented kids and his work with mathematically talented kids. And I just thought it was really fascinating. And so at the end of the course, towards the end of the course, I went and talked to him and I said, you know, I find this work on mathematically talented kids so fascinating. I'm wondering if you would be willing to, you know, are you taking on graduate students and would you be willing to consider me for graduate studies? Well, he said, well, what I want you to do is to read all these things. And he loaded me up with all these books and articles. And he says, and come back to talk to me after you've read it. And then at Hopkins, they have an intersession. So when you come back, you don't actually come back till the end of January because of the 3-week intersession. So that holiday season, I went to visit my parents who were living in Italy. And I took all the books back and I read them all. And I was even more fascinated and I was hooked. And so when I came back, I came and talked to him and said, now I'm even more interested in this area. And that's how I got into the area of talent development. And in the beginning, when we were doing the work, we were really focused on what are the best ways to educate mathematically talented, scientifically talented, but also verbally talented kids. What are the best ways to educate them? If you can determine, for example, that a 7th grader already has mastered algebra, you know, and at those days, you couldn't even get algebra until 9th grade, you know, what do you do? You know, how do you intervene? And so we tried all kinds of things to figure out what are the best ways to intervene on their behalf so that these kids were learning new things every day too. We just felt that every child has the right to learn something new every day. And these kids, because they had really were so advanced in mathematics or in science or in the verbal areas, you know, they weren't learning anything new. And we were very, you know, Julian Stanley at the time was just really afraid that we would really lose the talent that exists in our children because they were exposed to unchallenging curriculum and their love for learning and would just diminish. And he wanted to intervene to keep them excited about learning, keep them interested in learning, and get them to college so that where they could really sample the curriculum where you didn't have the age restraints as to when you study something. You know, if you think about it, it's only in K through 12 that we actually have requirements for kids as to what you can learn at a certain age. If you think about it, nobody asks you how old you are when you study at university level. They find out, what do you know? Are you ready? Do you have the prerequisites? And then you can get into the class. Nobody says, oh, you're 18 years old. I'm sorry, this is a 20-year-old class. You can't come into it. Similarly, if you're going into sports and academics, you don't sign up for 8-year-old tennis lessons or 8-year-old swimming lessons. What do? You find out how well they can swim or play tennis and you place them accordingly. What about music? You don't have 6-year-old piano classes. So why is it, we were asking at the time, why is it that for reading and math and science, why is it that we can only learn certain things at age 6 and only other things at age 7? Why can't we open up the curriculum and act in the same way as we do in all other arenas? And the last one that I always say is, we don't buy age 7 shoes. We don't buy, we measure. So why don't we do the same in our curriculum? And I think you can imagine how frustrating you would be if you're really good at any one of those things and you had to begin, but with 6-year-olds, even though you were operating as 9 or 10-year-olds. And we felt the same way for kids who were advanced. And so we were basically started off playing with the curriculum, the existing curriculum, and say, let's be flexible, let's open it up. Well, that's where I started. And then we tried all kinds of interventions, and we've been following up those individuals that we've worked with, and we have about 5,000 we're following up throughout their adult lives, and we have data on them at 12, and we identified them, 18, 23, mid-30s, age 50, and we're pretty soon going to start an age 65 survey. But basically, the work shifted from, and this is where it all comes back and makes sense to you. As the kids grew older and became adults, what we began researching was, how do you develop excellence? How do you develop eminence? And if you think about universities, aren't universities places of talent development? Faculty are developing talents, students are developing talents, everyone is developing their talents. And so I always have viewed, and this is how this all makes sense, that being dean is really professional practice, because I am developing talents. And I view my role as dean as creating the resources and the conditions to allow people to become the best that they can be, for their talents to flourish, to be nourished. And so I always see that the work that I began as an undergraduate working with gifted kids, it has changed as I have gotten older, and the individuals I've worked with have gotten older, and I've asked different questions. And this is just basically applying what I've learned and what I study. So a very long-winded answer, but I feel like this is all part of a path and a different way to really use the studies, because I've always said about Peabody College that we don't just think great thoughts, we act on them. And I think we create new knowledge, but I'm also acting on it. So that's my long answer for that one. Sorry. Be careful when you ask me questions about my work. And I try to keep that one short.
I think that's great. And I love that you tied in the journey of how studying all of this information now applies to your job today as the dean, and the talent development just continues to grow into higher education. And so I know you mentioned a lot about Julian Stanley, your professor, who introduced you to this whole topic, and now that you've been doing the study for 49 years. Who else in your life had an influence on you professionally, and who are some mentors or role models that you help shaped you throughout your career?
I think my primary role model is Julian Stanley. I always called him my professional father, and that's the way he was. He was a wonderful mentor, and I think in the 70s, when he was worrying about the curriculum and losing kids, just like we worry about losing kids today, it was prescient. He was the ultimate mentor. And he loved working with the kids that he identified. He'd have phone conversations with them and counseled them, provided so much individual attention. But he also did the same for me and helped guide me. And so he's this dominant influence on my life. And he has been my mentor and my role model. And and for those of you who haven't heard the stories, I know some of you have, Julian Stanley was this famous professor at Hopkins, but he began his career at Peabody College. When he got his doctorate from Harvard, he came to Peabody College. And I always wondered, when I got to Peabody in 1998, it felt so good, because I've always been interested in education, but I'm also interested in human development and psychology. And what it felt so good about it was that both sides of me were nurtured. Throughout my career until that time, I was either in a college of education or I was in a psychology department, and I went back and forth. And when I was in one, I missed the other. But I just love the psychological theories and the psychological methods, but I love how they are applied to issues of education and learning. And to me at Peabody, that was what brings it. It brought it together. It was natural. I didn't have to let one side not grow and develop, because I was in this context and culture. Context matters. And I think, so that's made it so a very special place. And I could say that there have been other, influences on my life. I worked, with my colleague, David Lubinsky. We've been working together for a long time. He certainly hasn't had any influence on me, but there are other influences too. But I would say the other person has been my actual father, who always had high expectations of me. And, I don't know if any of you ever saw the movie The Whale Rider. If you haven't, you should see it. I love that movie, and it's really about. It's in one of these sort of in an indigenous culture, where there was a tribe, and the chief of the tribe was trying to develop his son to be the heir apparent, but his son was not interested in the job, didn't have the right attributes. But his daughter had all the attributes and all the interests and all the talents to do this well. But he just couldn't see it because she was a woman and a female. And in the end, of course, she rises and she becomes the chief. And I remember coming back home from that movie, thinking about it, and I thought, my parents never treated me differently because I was a girl. They never held different expectations from me because I was a girl. And so then they were living, at that time they were in Spain. So I wrote them and I just thanked them for not having different expectations of me because I was a girl. And, I said, well, why did you do that? I was so different in those ages. You got to think back when I was growing up, we had colleges that were just for males. There were a lot of limitations on us women, and I'm sure Sharon can talk about it, what she has faced. But there were a lot of barriers, and there I had parents who didn't act in that way. And my dad just said, well, when I saw you going after that pounding block with that hammer, I knew there was something in you. And so anyway, my parents also there have been many people along the way that I admire as scholars and so on. But when I think about the key people, and I will also say my first husband had a big role in this, a big role in shaping who I was. And the marriage ended, but I still have to give him credit because he also helped me become the person I am today. Especially when I had my first child and I didn't want to leave my baby with a daycare provider, and I just wanted to stay home and take care of this beautiful baby. And I was crying and crying. I just want to take care of this baby. And he said, you're going back to school. And I thank him for that because it was the right thing for me. But at the time, for anyone, when you have a child, that first day to drop off your baby at a daycare or a babysitter, it tears you apart. So I have to give credit where credit is due.
Thank you. I really like the fact that you brought up mentoring as a nurturing relationship, because I do really think, Sharon alluded to this on another call, but mentoring is really a friendship and a work relationship all in one, and I love that. So you're talking about your experiences as like being a woman growing up, and this could relate or not relate, but when is a time that stepping out of your comfort zone allowed you to grow, and how did it affect your personal and professional journey?
Well, I think I've always have had opportunities to step out of my comfort zone, or opportunities, or it was forced upon me. I know that a lot of people don't realize this, but I am at heart inside, I'm a shy person. I am a compensated shy person, as they call it. I know people don't believe me when I say that because I've learned, but inside of me, I'm shy. But it has forced me always, I'm an immigrant. I came here first time when I was 9, and I didn't know any English. And at those days, the world was a lot larger, if you want to say it. The difference between Sweden and Southern California, that's where I went to, Pasadena, was huge. you know, there was just so many things that you just did not understand that certainly took you out of your comfort zone as you try to acclimate and become part of this culture and learning things, and things that are little things like, you know, in Sweden, at that time, girls weren't allowed to wear pants. Well, you could in Sweden. And well, when it started raining in Southern California, you know, it gets kind of cool. So my mom put pants on us and we went to school. Sent to the principal's office because I was wearing pants. Then I was sent to the principal's office because I was wearing clogs, because clogs made noise in the stairwell, and, you know, all these things. And if you're a shy girl, 9 years old, you're just so humiliated that you didn't know, and you didn't know the language. So definitely that took me out of my comfort zone. And but then we moved to Germany, and I had the same thing all over again. And I had to learn a new culture. And then I went to England, and then I came to America, but this time I came to Maryland, which I think, if you know, Maryland is very different than Pasadena in the 60s and the hippies era. So you can imagine that I'm having gone through many different cultures. But I think about one that I had to do, that I did on my own, that I wasn't forced into, was that I remember the first presentation that I ever had to make, and I was a nervous wreck. I mean, it was just to a women's group who wanted to hear about the study. So, I mean, low stakes, nice, you know, it was old ladies were, you know, nice ladies who were listening, and I was a nervous wreck. And similarly, the next time I had to give a scientific presentation, it was kind of funny. It was the National Association for Gifted Children, and my mentor saw the world, and sometimes he saw things differently. And he thought that since they were hosting the NAGC convention in Baltimore, this was back in, I think it was in 1979. That he thought he wanted people not to be distracted by all the sights and the fun things to do in Baltimore, and he thought about that it should be convenient. So he basically booked the Holiday Inn by the airport at that time to have this big convention. Well, there was no way to get to from the Holiday Inn to downtown. And he thought that was great because then everybody could go to the sessions, but they also didn't have enough rooms. And so my first scientific presentation was sitting on a bed in a bedroom giving a presentation. And if that doesn't take you out of your comfort zone, then I don't know what does. And years later, a couple, the colleagues that, gifted is a small field. We all know each other. And they say, "Oh, Camilla, you have sure changed from those days when you gave a presentation sitting on a double bed." So anyway, I guess I had a comfortable seat, but the rest wasn't very comfy. Well, I got over it. Put it that way, I got over it, and I'm not as shy about presenting as I used to be. But I was a nervous wreck whenever I would have to do that.
Thank you. And I know that doing presentations obviously isn't something fun for you, but you have to do them often. But what is something that brings you joy, and what do you like to do for fun when you have the time to do it?
Everybody says it, but this is a genuine answer. It's my family and friends. It's my family. I have lots of kids, and I have lots of grandkids. And I have siblings, and my mom is still alive, and and I have some really good friends, and one of them is on this call. And being with people who you really, really care about and love, I think it's really rewarding. Some people like to have a lot of friends. I just need a few special ones. And I have, and that just brings me friends. Otherwise, So just being with them, being with my grandkids. I have 3 who live here in Nashville, and in regular times, I love taking them to the zoo, or, taking them to Cheekwood or science, and having them spend the night. And, and every night, and when they spend the weekend with me and spend the night, we, we all have to make Swedish pancakes on Sunday morning. And with all the help that I get from them, it only takes twice as long to get them done. But that is a tradition. I think they love the making of the pancakes more than actually the eating of the pancakes, but they love them. They're actually pretty darn good. And I remember when my daughter had her 3rd child and had complications, and so she had to be in the hospital. They were living with me for quite some time. And in the first morning we got up, it was a work day. Well, it wasn't a Sunday where we make pancakes, and I woke up and said, hurry up, we gotta get going, I gotta get to work. And they're like, what? We're not going to make pancakes this morning? We're not going to have fun? They saw another side of me. No, get those clothes on, get going. I got to get to work. So that was a different experience, but I love that. And I love gardening. I love puttering on my projects and crafts. And of course, I love to read and to listen to books. Those are the kinds of things. But now in COVID, I haven't been able to see my grandkids as much as I have. So I've had a lot of fun digging in my garden, working on projects and things like that. Those are the kinds of things. And of course, I love to travel and I love to see the world. But again, right now, that has to be put on hold.
That's so funny that you mentioned the Swedish pancakes, because my grandma is German and we always demand/ask for German pancakes every time we're with her, and they're so good.
We'll have to have a cook-off.
I prefer Swedish pancakes. I'm going to invite myself over. But I know you mentioned you love to read and just learning in general. Is there a favorite quote or mantra that's guided you throughout these years, or one? It could be multiple of them too.
Yep, I do have one. And I'm going to actually read it for you, because it's the Serenity Prayer. But not everybody says it exactly the way it was. It's from Niebuhr. But this one, it's always the one I go to. And I think people who are around me can know that I refer to it an awful lot. And that is, I know you hear it in, Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that, but I think it's really a good one for life. And that is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. It does go on. It is longer than that, but that's the one part of it that I really live by. But it does also encourage you to live one day at a time and to enjoy every moment and accept your hardships that come by. And I always feel that, we all face challenges and hardships. We all have things in our lives, and I think people sometimes don't realize that how many hardships every person has faced. There's somehow seems to be an expectation that we're not supposed to have hardships and challenges, but we do, and I think we learn from them and we grow from them. And I always see that all the challenges and hardships that go my way are sent to me because of the purpose to help me learn and become a better human being. And I reflect on them in those ways. So the first part about accepting, certain things, but also having the courage to change things and having the wisdom, but also to know that when hardships come your way, to see what is the learning opportunity in here, is why this is happening to you, and what do you learn from that, and how can I become a better human being as a result. That's kind of how I try to handle my life.
I love that. And we did have another question on here. I think the Serenity Prayer may help with that, but it was, when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, which COVID may have presented some of those opportunities, what do you do, and what questions do you ask yourself to get back on track?
Well, I really go inside, and I try to think about what happened, but I actually go to gratitude. Uh, and and I try to look at the glass as half full rather than half empty. And I really try to think about all the things in my life that I'm so grateful for. That yes, this thing has sent me a curveball, but also I can't forget all the good things that have happened to me and all the things that I'm grateful for. But again, it sends me kind of back to, thinking about how did this happen? What have I learned? And reflecting on to better understand it, and use metaphors and stories to understand it. But sometimes, you know what? If you're just frustrated, sure helps to go out and dig in the garden. Boy, those holes can get dug really fast. And so just take it out on a project, and although something else is bad happening, if you can make the world more beautiful around you, you can fix something, you can do something, it feels like you're still making some progress. And so, yeah, I get busy. And, that's something that, with my parents living in Europe and my siblings living in Europe, I'm the only one here in America because they stayed in Europe, but I came back. Is uh, is it was many years where we had to say goodbye, and we didn't have the money to see each other, and for long periods of time. And I went 2 to 3 years without seeing my family, even though they're so important to me. And so when they would come and visit, or I would visit and I would have to leave, I would be an absolute wreck. I would be so upset because I knew it would be such a long time until I could see them again. Sometimes you may not see somebody for a long time, but if you know you have the option, or know that you can, or you don't know that it won't be long, it's easier to handle. But if you knew that you weren't going to see your mom or your dad or anyone for a long period of time, when you said goodbye, you sometimes asked yourself, is saying hello worth the pain of saying goodbye? And I have to actually I sometimes question that. Sometimes, because you get used to it. So whenever they would leave, I'd get busy. The house would become sparkling clean. I would do everything just to keep my mind off of it, get busy. That's how I deal with all those hardships. It's just distract yourself, get busy, and usually going back to work and getting with the people help me get over it. But that's one of those things when I always, Shakespeare sure got it wrong when he said saying goodbye is such a sweet sorrow. He sure got that one wrong.
Goodbyes are definitely hard. Going back into, you would get busy at work and things, what words would you use to describe your leadership style, or who has helped influence like the way that you lead here at Vanderbilt?
I really try to be a consensus seeker, to try to see if we can get consensus. I really want to hear different viewpoints. And so actually, Catherine McTammany asked me to speak to her class, her undergraduate class, and say, what book on leadership, has inspired you, and to talk about that. And I think it's The Team of Rivals. This is the book about Lincoln and how he put his team together. And he basically put together, first of all, they were his rivals. So he put his rivals on there, but he was very interested in hearing all their perspectives and be open to different perspectives. And I want people to disagree with me. And I want people to say to me, if they think that I'm doing something wrong, to tell me. And let's talk about it. Sometimes we're going to have to agree to disagree, but at least we can talk about it. I can hear their perspectives, and I think I can make a better decision. So I really want to hear those different, because what I want to do is to do the best for Peabody College and the people in it, our faculty, our staff, our students. I want to do the best for them. And if I can incorporate multiple viewpoints and perspectives, I think I'll help make better decisions. And I'll make mistakes. We all are human. We all make mistakes. And I always say the best thing to do is, when you've made a mistake, is to acknowledge it and then do the best to fix it. Uh, don't just, dig your heels in and say, and ignore it. Just acknowledge it. People are generally so kind when you say, oops. And I've appreciated it when I have colleagues who help me who prevent me from putting my foot in the mud in the first place. And so I like to have different perspectives, to discuss things, to hash things out, to learn from what we did, but also try to get as much consensus as we can, and to collaborate, and and to really work with everyone to get to the best place. In the end, I have to make the call, but I'm hoping I can be informed by all these different points of view. So that's really how I try to lead, is to try to be a good listener.
I think the
So
leaders definitely get feedback from everyone and are looking for a consensus. And this is kind of a piggyback question to that one. What would you say that is your superpower as a leader and as a person, or even as a learner? A talent that you've honed into a strength that helps you achieve excellence in your work every day?
it's of course a hard one. It's also a very personal question. So it's hard, it's hard to answer. I thought, I've thought about that one. So, and I think the fact that I had to move to such different environments starting at such an early age, to move to Southern California in the 60s, and it was so different from my life in Sweden. And then, to get used to that, and then to move to Germany, and then, having to learn that culture and the people and how they work. And then I moved to England, and then, to Baltimore, back to America and Iowa, and then down here. I feel that I've lived in very different cultures, and of course I've traveled to China and India, and I've been, we've done work in Abu Dhabi. So, I've learned about the Arab culture, which I think in America we really don't know much about. I think I know that when I came there, first time I had all these preconceptions and stereotypes that just vanished as soon as I walked off the plane. Like, okay, this is not what I had anticipated, and immediately had to change. But and I, by the way, I loved going to Abu Dhabi, and I loved that culture. I really enjoyed our work there for 10 years. But the bottom line is, well, what has that all taught me? I think that it's taught me to be very, to really observe, to really look and see the people, read nonverbals, to really look at the context. And I think what it has helped me develop is a good ability to read people, to kind of understand who they are. Because I think my survival, in a way, depended on that. Much more than when you're living in a culture that you actually may think that you know more than you do. You may assume that your assumptions about how people are, how they should behave, what they think, and so on, and what makes them upset or not. You may think that you know, but you really don't know. And I think that's where, to say, the unconscious bias training comes in so much, because it opens your eyes here about things. But I think I had to have my eyes opened up so many times that I never took anything for granted. And I'm always looking and observing people, always looking for their reactions, trying to understand and see. And I think that has helped me, but I think that was part of how I had learned how to get along in these different worlds, and to be sensitive to those things. And I think also shy people tend to also be good observers anyway, and to be reading people. So I think I had that perhaps coming to me, But then I had all those experiences. And so I think that I think I'm a fairly good judge of people. I think I am. And I think this helps me because if I can understand the people I'm working with, then I can better work through an issue of a problem. If I can be a better listener and an observer, then I can get to the solution better and see when somebody reacts negatively but doesn't say anything. But I can see when their body language changes, their facial expression changes. I think I see it quickly. I think I've honed that skill, and I notice those things right away. And therefore, it helps me navigate through something in a positive way and get to where we need to be because I'm attentive to all the people who need to be brought along. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think those experiences have really helped me. And and how to work with people who we are all so different. And America is full of different cultures, and I think that's what makes it great. And but when I came to America, it was the melting pot. We all had to fit in. Now we celebrate those cultures much more. We have really moved along. It's a very different place.
I think that's a great superpower. And even just listening, it sounds a lot like you've had resilient moments throughout and adaptable moments being in all these different contexts too. And we did have a question from the chat, so I want to make sure we get to that. The question's from Brittany, and it says, I'd love to hear Dean Benbow talk about how she balanced raising children while working in a rigorous program.
I don't know how I did it, quite honest. I look back now when my 3 grandkids come and visit for the weekend, I'm exhausted. When they were there for the whole month, I was about to oh my gosh. But, I got used to it early. And people don't know, I was very young when I had my first child. And so I didn't know anything different. I just, powered on through. But what I'd say to people is best to have kids. So I've always said that to people when you're young, because first of all, you have a lot of energy, and you can go through it. But also, I just I just focused on being on my profession, being a good mom, and being a good being good at my work. And a lot of things fell off. I didn't have time for friends. I didn't have time for this at those times because all my spare time was focused on my family. And, and it was a hard balance. And I know that there were disappointments with my kids that I couldn't go to every swim meet or I couldn't go to everything. I couldn't. So I tried to pick and choose. And one of the things like we did was to say, we're all going to do swimming because I can go to a swim meet and I can see all of you swim because the way swim meets are put together, you get to see everyone. It's not like you're going to 7 baseball games or softball games. That's 7 different games. You go for a day and you see all the kids swim and they have multiple events and you're done. And I said, now, if you do things outside after that, I'll try to come to some of them, but I can't come to all of them. And so there were just a lot of trade-offs and compromises. And I don't know if I did it right or not. I have regrets. I wish I could have done more. I look back and I wish I could have done more. But I also think I maybe I did the right balancing act because I hope I hit the right Goldilocks solution. I don't know, but it's really hard. That's what I would say. And how I had to balance it, you have to look at what's important to you. And what I balanced off and what I did is with my need structure. You have a different need structure. You needed to hit a different pivot point and a different Goldilocks solution. There is no one thing, but to really think about what matters and put that first. And I kind of remember too, and that this was something that, I guess I get engaged in storytelling a lot, but I was newly married and oh, I wanted to be this really good housewife. I was going to keep that house clean and all of these wonderful things. And then I said to my husband, I said, I don't know. I can't get my studies done. I'm having a hard time getting my studies done. And this is one of those things I'm grateful for him. He said, Camilla, you're gonna do your studies first, and then you'll squeeze in the cleaning later. Focus on the things that are most important first. And I kind of remember, and so I kind of thought afterwards, no one's going to say on their deathbed, I wish I had scrubbed that toilet one time too many, a few more times. Or, nobody's going to say, I wish I'd gotten that done. They're going to say, really, I wish I'd spent more time with family and friends. I think that's what it is. And so maybe my house, when I was raising kids, wasn't the most cleanest. I've made up for lost time. But, at the time, I just said, as long as it's clean, it doesn't have to be spick and span and win the Good Housekeeping Award. I'll let that slide. I just let that one slide. So that's how I kind of decided that, some things just, you just have to take the Serenity Prayer and accept those. That was one of the things I just had to accept. And I went for it. So I can't say it, but I also, when you raise a family with a lot of kids, you do it differently because you're a team. And the older kids have to help with the younger kids. And we just knew how to get out in the morning. Everybody had a job. Everybody had to do it. And my kids had to be independent. They had to learn how to do things on their own. And when they brought friends over, they would say, your mom lets you do that? And they'd look at them like, why? Why not? Why can't I do this? And so my kids became independent and they helped each other. And I think they bonded together in a nice way. So you raise kids very, very differently. And again, another kind of a trade-off. So I don't know. In the end, you do what you have to do. As Steinbeck said, in his novel, and it's a little sexist, but I will, it said basically a man becomes a man when he has to. I say a person becomes an adult when they have to, and you do what you have to. And I did what I have to, and I just took one day at a time. I got to get through this day and I'll worry about tomorrow. So, so that's, that's what what I've handled. And if you start worrying about how am I going to do this for 20 years, you become immobilized. But how do I just get through this one? And we had a lot of fun and a lot of chaos. You got to live with chaos. That's what I did. Got to live with chaos.
I'm going to hop in here and wrap us up because we are right at 1 o'clock. Camilla, I love what you just shared. I only have 2 kids and it's a balancing act for me, but there was a Nietzsche quote that got me through my freshman year of college. I had a philosophy class and it was, one has to have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star. And a lot of times for me, parenting kind of feels like that. Like there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of beautiful dancing stars. So
I love that.
That sweet reminder. And thank you so much for your transparency and vulnerability today and for just sharing this hour with us. We are so appreciative of your leadership, really heartfelt and brave and courageous. And we so appreciate all that you do for all of us and for the Peabody community. You've set a really high bar for our future conversation. With our next leader, we've got a couple invitations out and we will share who we're gonna have for our next What's Your Why in the coming weeks. So we hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon and thank you for being here. I'll stay on for a minute or two if anybody wants to ask anything. Thanks, Camilla. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, bye.